Hello, good day and ciao. My name is not Martin Scorsese. My name is Dino V. Welcome, hello to the channel. Thank you to new subscribers. Please like and comment. There we go. I'll say it at the end because you won't bother, will you? Prove me wrong and do it. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is what I was very fortunate to watch yesterday evening with friends, including John Brett, big Beatles fan and also brilliant author of Billy Joel biography. You can get it on Amazon. David Stark, who sneaked into the Beatles' Yellow Submarine film premiere in 1968, being cheeky like he is. And he's also written a great book on it called It's All Too Much. If you like the Beatles, buy that. Also, Richard Porter. You may know Richard. Richard does the Beatles walks in London. So if you go visit in London and you're a Beatles fan, you need to go on Richard Porter's walks. And Richard has also written a few books, primarily about the Beatles in London. But he's working on a new book with somebody else, and it's called, I'm not telling you, you'll have to wait and see. So yesterday evening went to a beautiful cinema in the heart of London at Battersea Power Station. I don't know if you've been there. If you like shopping and food, wow, amazing place. It was a gorgeous cinema. The staff were brilliant, beautiful surroundings, comfy, even had a seat where you could sit back and relax. And why we're in London with various other people was to see a preview, not premiere, of the latest Beatles new documentary, Martin Scorsese documentary called Beatles 64, directed by David Tedeschi. Basically what this is covering is when the Beatles arrived in America. They arrived on February the 7th, 1964, and they were there for 2 weeks. So when their Pan Am plane touched down after leaving the UK and arriving at JFK Airport, they had no idea what to expect. They did know they were number one with I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was an incredible feat. When they found out about it, I believe when they were in Paris, they had a residency in Paris in January. So they're very excited to go. The Fab Four are going to arrive in America, and they were the biggest selling band then. Some bands are full of hype and they have a short lifespan as a career, but not the Beatles. They seem to break every rule and rewrite the history books, just rip everything that come before, and arrived like a hurricane, like a whirlwind. What had happened in America, and this is very, very important, just to explain 1963, the Beatles gradually got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in the United Kingdom. Every record they released seemed to sell more, and Beatlemania got bigger and bigger through the United Kingdom. America was a bit slow in catching on. They soon caught on, and boy did they catch on. But I remember 1963 was a gigantic year for the Beatles. They had a lot of gigantic years, but 63, they were just going up and up and up and up, and getting to America and being number one must have been mind-blowing for them. What is very important is that in November 1963 in the USA, the president, the young, good-looking, vibrant, lovely John F. Kennedy, was assassinated in Dallas. Now, this rocked the nation. It rocked a lot of the youth and a lot of the older people. And you can see the footage where people are crying and visually upset. To have anyone assassinated, and I'm not going to go about John Lennon because it brings it down a bit. Actually, I'm bringing it down a bit now, aren't I? But it's so important that the assassination of JFK, America was in the doldrums. It was an unhappy place. It seemed they were quite depressed. That their bright hope and spark for the future had gone. They needed something. They needed a catalyst. They needed something to awaken their souls, make them smile, make them happy again. And these four long-haired people from a city called Liverpool in England, who spoke funny, dressed funny. Oh yeah, they spoke a bit like that, you know. That's a bad impersonation. So when they arrived, they were like four aliens arriving in America when they touched down at the airport. But America needed it. The rest of the world wanted the Beatles as well, even though they hadn't caught on yet. But America needed it more than anyone. And many things in life are about timing. And this was crucial timing for the Beatles. I often wonder if JFK hadn't have been assassinated, how would the Beatles' impact on the USA have been? This is just my personal feeling again. This is all my personal feelings about the documentary. Just my thoughts and feelings on the documentary. My point being, if JFK hadn't been assassinated, I don't think the Beatles would have been so popular. America wouldn't have needed such a reason to go crazy and mad like they did, as you'll see when you see the documentary. But sadly, JFK was assassinated, and the Beatles arrived and blew everyone away. But this Martin Scorsese documentary, directed by David Tedeschi, is available on Disney Plus from November the 29th. And you will watch it, you will go and see it. Some of you are going to like it, some won't, some will think, oh, it's okay. So these are my personal thoughts on it. First of all, the footage is amazing. There's so much cleaned up footage. You may have seen before on various documentaries on 8 Days a Week and the Beatles' first US visit. Most of the footage, I believe, is what was filmed by the Mailsley brothers, which is on this, and I always forget their name. Always forget the names. I should make a note, but it's the Mailsley brothers. Is it Albert and David? I'm useless. Or is it James? I know it's Albert. It's Albert and his brother. So Brian Epstein gave them permission to film the Beatles, and thank God he did. I mean, there were loads of camera crews there. There was loads of journalists, media, photographers, but how they capture the stuff right up in the face, and whether it be on the floor, in the air, it captures the Beatles brilliant. What it does capture about the Beatles as well is how close they all were, like four brothers. It was almost like four brothers joined together. I've said this before, they're four of the funniest people I don't know them, but I've ever seen. The way they bounce off each other with, they call that Liverpool wit, I don't think there's any doubt about it. John and George, especially when they banter with each other, is incredible. And George comes across in this documentary absolutely brilliant. So if you're a big George fan, you're going to love this. He's so funny, as is John. And they're surrounded by lots of crazy people. When they arrive at the airport, you may have seen the footage where thousands of fans are there. Then they're interviewed by the American media. And the American media have never, did I say media? The American media have never seen anything like this. They're these four strange-looking aliens from a planet UK, and they're asking them questions, and virtually every answer given by one of the Beatles is hysterical and funny. The Beatles have been through all the media in the UK, so they were probably getting asked questions they'd never been asked before. One thing I did notice about the film, you may be aware, is I love it at the airport where they asked about the haircuts, and George says he had one yesterday, and they laugh, but he had. Through the film documentary, I can't stop watching George's hair. I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's possibly the worst Beatles haircut ever. So sorry, George. Well, your hairdresser, what was his name? What was the hairdresser's name? I can't remember the hairdresser's name. Anyway, George's haircut is a bit of a... It just seems to go all over the place in the documentary, but it is hysterical and it is funny. The footage is incredible. It's terrifying when they leave the airport and they make their way to the plaza and all the thousands of fans coming around the car. How they didn't crack up and go insane, I don't know. I think their humour got them through and their support for each other. And you will have seen much of this footage in the Beatles' first US visit, but there's about, I'd say, roughly 20 minutes of footage you won't have seen. And to me, that is the most fascinating part of this documentary, especially when they're speaking to people on the street, young people, old people, white and black, getting a big, diverse cross-section of American ages. Because primarily is crazy. I mean, crazy. These crazy screaming New York girls. Sometimes when interviewed and asked questions, they're screaming so loud you can hardly understand what they're even saying. That's me impersonating a New York teen back then. So it is really fascinating. There's various famous people that pop up in it. I'm not going to mention them all because obviously spoilers. I'm going to be talking about a documentary. If you don't know what happens, don't watch this, and I won't tell you everything that happens. And so there's various famous people in it who you will know. There is old footage. There's footage from the anthology where you've got George on it and Paul as well talking about when they arrived in America. There is footage of John. And I'm talking about. There was two bits of John Lennon footage which I hadn't seen before, which is nice. Not from February '64, but in the later years. The most fascinating revelation to me on this is Jack Douglas. Now, you may be aware who Jack Douglas is and worked on the Double Fantasy album with John and Yoko. I'm not going to explain why it was revelatory for me with Jack Douglas. My jaw probably went, "You are joking me." You'll see what I mean when you watch it. The music and the sound is like nothing you've heard before. You may have seen the Washington, D.C. performance. You may have watched the Ed Sullivan Show before, because that's available as well. The Ed Sullivan shows are on this. You may have this. This has got all the Ed Sullivan shows, but obviously the Beatles 64 just concentrates on Miami and New York. So the music is like nothing you've heard. When the band perform at the Washington DC at the Coliseum, I was sitting left of the screen. Paul's bass was coming out of the left, and I'd seen a lot of the instrumentation was on the other side with vocals in the centre. I've never ever heard the bass, each note so clean on Long Tall Sally. You'll see what I mean when you watch it. So I've got something falling down here. Another Beatles set on the floor. So watch Long Tall Sally and you'll see what I mean. You'll just be blown away by the power, the fever, the passion that the Beatles delivering on that. Ringo smashing away his drums, and I mean smashing. He's just hammering those drums like anything. But Paul's bass, you can hear every single note. So well done to George Martin on demixing, decluttering, and Wingnut and Peter Jackson separating the sound, and Giles Martin mixing it. Did I just say George Martin? Done an incredible job on there. So visually and musically, it is stunning. It's not perfect. There's bits I didn't like, but that's always going to happen. I love the bit on in the hotel with Murray the K. There's extra bits there you won't have seen. He's so cheeky. He's so New York, isn't he? They're kind of in your face and they go for it. But they seem to love him and he loved them, and they bounced off each other as well. You did get the feeling that America was a bit behind with the times, as in the clothes, the haircuts, the style, the way they looked. And I don't think there's any doubt about it that the Beatles just kicked American youth up the backside, shall we say, or the bottom, or bum, or butt, whichever word you use, reshaped them and redefined America, and gave, say, like a lot of the youngsters, a sense of purpose, something to enjoy, grasp, and believe in. The impact of the Beatles in February '64 can never be underestimated, not just on the youth, but they interview when they're walking around the streets. This is back in '64, and they're speaking to some of the older people who don't get it. There's obviously some of the older people that I was going to do a British accent then. A lot of the American parents do not like the Beatles. They see them as disgusting, evil, sexual, a bit of a mess. Probably like they did with Elvis, a threat to their children and not good. Probably at a time when Christianity was a lot bigger as well. There's new footage of Paul walking around his photo exhibition, Eyes of the Storm. He's walking around talking about some of the photographs and recollecting those days. And he went to one of the cabinets there, and you may be aware of this. Here you go, this is a plug for me, I don't know why. But I had a book, original 1964 book called, oh, I've got it now. I forgot what the book's called. Anyway, MPL and Paul McCartney's company bought my paperback book off me, and it's Travelling the World in the cabinet. Is it? It's not the true story of the Beatles, it's the other one. Here they are, the Beatles. I can't even remember. Anyway, my paperback's in there. I didn't note this because I know what the book's called and I can't remember it. Is it the true story of the Beatles? Anyway, my book's in the cabinet. I was hoping it'd be in the documentary, but it's not. Paul walks around anyway, talking about that. That was filmed recently. Ringo also there, and Martin Scorsese's in it for a while. Ringo's talking about his clothes. You see him walking around looking at some of his clothes. This is new recorded footage, and also talking about his drumming and the drum kit. That is fascinating. And as I say, they've got old bits of Paul and George from the anthology, and also John, obviously not from the anthology because John wasn't alive then, but bits of John talking. But the Jack Douglas bit is to me hysterical, as well as the Beatles' humour. A few notes here. What I did notice in it, when you're watching it, I don't know if you're like me, you're watching every single thing. I'm not always necessarily watching the Beatles. I'm looking in the background. There's Neil Aspinall. There was some of Brian Epstein in it, but to me there wasn't enough footage. I was hoping to see a lot more of Brian, because I love the way he talks, and he didn't get forgotten in this, but there wasn't much footage. And I guess the Mosley Brothers and everyone was busy filming the Fab Four. They weren't interested in Mr. Epstein. Sid Bernstein's in it as well, and there's some great stories which you may have heard about the effect that Beatles had, whether it be at Carnegie Hall, the ambassadors, when they went to the British Embassy, what happened there. There's a big touch on Motown and black music, Smokey Robinson, etc., the Isley Brothers, and I suppose it's true that we forget about how brilliant the cover versions the Beatles did, whether it be Please Mr. Postman, Twist and Shout, Money, all R&B or Motown artists that the Beatles have covered, and the Beatles love them. Sorry, who's been in there? Sorry about that, John. That is fascinating as well. I think we tend to forget. We think of their songs, She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand. I'm keeping it pre-60. I'm keeping it early 64 here. The cover versions, in my opinion, are way superior. There's also talk about, the Ronettes as well, which is very interesting as well. You may have heard a lot of the stories, as I say before. I'm just looking at my notes here, what I've also written down. One thing there's a lot of, which is quite scary, is cigarettes. It seems virtually every time they're filmed, apart from when they're on stage, they've got a cigarette. George, Christ, how many cigarettes did they get through? And they do like promoting the cigarettes, don't they? I did notice as well another thing, you see when they walk around with their transistor radios, which again you've probably seen before. In fact, going back to the 80s, I remember watching a British documentary, I think it was, called The Early Beatles, and that was the first time I'd seen any footage from February 64. And the bit I loved was when they're in the taxi. I think when they go into Central Park, so I think that's the bit where it's got Paul, Ringo and Paul. George wasn't there, he had a sore throat and he's being cared for by his sister, but they got the transistor radio and they're saying, oh, the Beatles are going doing their poetry, and Paul's going, we ain't reading no poetry. But on the radio, talk about sell. It's a Pepsi transistor radio. And then when I don't know if it's on, it might be on the train, so John's drinking a drink and it's got a can of drink and it's Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola and Pepsi are both got in there. Were they just giving them free, or were they paid to do that? Did they realise that was like product placement, like you get in a lot of films? I did notice that. So look out for the Coke and you can't miss the Pepsi. In summing it up, somebody else said to me, maybe it's too long. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe there are too many people with talking about the past, what happened then. I'd have just been happy it had just all been footage from February 64. That's what I want to see, with just the Beatles talking. I suppose it is interesting to hear other people's angles. I remember watching it back then and the effect that the Beatles had. And I do understand that has to be in it, but I told you, maybe I'm just old-fashioned. I just want to see old footage of the Beatles and nothing much else. There's a great bit as well. There's many great bits. There is many great bits where there's a great line that Paul says, defy convention, in it. He's talking to the camera about filming this microphone. And that's what the Beatles did, didn't they? They defied convention. No one had been anything like them before. No one's been anything like them since. And they made the world such a happy, better place. But the craziness of the American fans and girls, as they screaming, sneaking into the hotel, trying to get in there to meet them, trying to get there, being interviewed on the streets, and all fighting to get near them. It is hysterical and crazy and a bit scary. And the Beatles were captured at the time when they had so much energy and it was new and enjoyable to them. And they were the kings of the world. The four kings of the world have taken over Britain, taken over Europe, and now America. So do go and watch it. It's incredible documentary, so well done, director David Tedeschi, Martin Scorsese, Wingnut, Peter Jackson, Giles Martin. You're going to watch it whether I say it or not. Will I see it again? I probably will watch it again because I want to see the bits that I missed first time. But visually, sonically, soundingly, which is a new word, it is truly, truly stunning. I think it's too long, and I wish some of those bits have been cut out with people being interviewed about those days. I think that's about it. I'm just looking at my notes here if there's anything else that I want to say. No, I think that's basically it. I've rattled on for 20 minutes. There was a Q&A after, which I have filmed, and I will put that up on YouTube as well. So if you want to see people involved with the making of the film, I did film that, and that goes on about 20 minutes. So that will be an insight as well. So, spoiler alert, don't watch that if you don't want to know what's going to happen in the film. Let me know what you think of it in your comments. Some of you may have seen it already, not many of you, I don't think. I feel privileged and honoured that I managed to get tickets for this, so I'm very happy. But you will be watching it on Friday and the following week. So let me know in the comments, and like and subscribe. You may be aware I have some Facebook pages. I have a coming up page dedicated to Paul McCartney and the Beatles. There's also a page for people that are going to see Paul McCartney. I don't want to say Paul McCartney. In December. If you haven't got tickets, selling tickets, you want advice possibly on hotels, travel or whatever, or maybe meet up with fans, join that group as well. I have other McCartney groups on the 7-inch box set. If you've got the 7-inch singles box set, you can join my group as well, but you'll have to private message me on there because I don't just let anybody in. And if you collect McCartney 3, as in the multicoloured ones, I have a Facebook group for that. I've paused now. Record collector. If you like McCartney, get the record collector. If you like John and Yoko, there's a record collector coming out soon as well. So in '64, the Beatles got to America, kicked their butts, backsides, bums, behinds, and shook them up and gave them something to go mad and be happy about and rejuvenate them. And it was only 2 years, I suppose, 2.5 years later when this happened. Stamp out the Beatles. They never did stamp them out, and here we are in 2024, 60 years after they arrived in the States, and they're probably bigger than ever, and probably selling more than ever. Praise the Beatles. Anyway, this is Dino V saying goodbye to you. Thank you for watching. Is it fab? Yes, yes, yes. Ooh.